Hey, welcome into the Stink Truth Podcast. Mark Schlereth alongside my partner, Mike Evans. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. Make sure you subscribe and share if you will. If you like it, if you don't, keep your mouth shut. We appreciate that about you. How are you, Mike?
Well, Mark, as somebody that I'm sure, based on your experience, was used to high grades in school.
Yes, yeah, oh yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, by the way, you got to tell the story real quick. What was your strategy when it came in college to taking finals?
Oh, I mean, I did a lot of different things, but a lot of times I try to get the final off campus at like a local pub. See if we could do like an oral presentation.
So you would invite
beers.
You would invite your professor out for beers.
Yeah, that worked.
And ask for an oral.
Yeah,
test.
That worked well.
And
then they'd
work
be
well.
like, after they got a little drunk, they'd be like, and I'm like, and then they would throw something at me.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's it. You
They're
pass.
Like, boom.
Well, speaking of
Just like
grades,
that.
the annual NFL Players Association grades for every team in the NFL came out, and it created a lot of buzz for some of the high grades, but more importantly, some of the bad grades. I mean, you had like the Jets ownership got an F-.
Right.
The Arizona Cardinals got crushed for a lot of their grades. And just to give you an example, even the gold standard in the NFL for the last several years, of course, has been the Kansas City Chiefs. And yet, here are their grades according to their players. Treatment of families, 15th in the NFL. Locker room, 28th. Training room, 29th. Training staff, 28th. Weight room, 30th. Ownership, 26th. So how much stock do you put in the importance of these grades?
Yeah, not a lot. I mean, I don't like the treatment of families. Like, you get one person that complains about, there's not air conditioning in here, or it's not heated over there, there's not, there's no hot cocoa or whatever. You're always going to have a Karen or a Todd or what's another guy? Chad. One of those Karen, Todd, Chads.
Todd with one D.
Yeah, well, that guy's going to complain. He's going to complain about the facility. He's going to complain. Oh, I had to stand in line. It was a lot of people. It was uncomfortable. So you're always going to have somebody that complains. The locker room. So a lot of these kids come from these cushy colleges where it's, an arms racing college to have the nicest locker room. And then they come into that locker room and it maybe is a little bit tighter, or maybe there's no pool table in the middle or ping pong table or whatever. And you're like, oh, this locker room sucks. So I don't, I think a lot of the guys are, come from a program where they're a little bit, I don't want to say soft, spoiled. They're a little spoiled.
Well, Ryan Fitzpatrick, he had his view of the Jets ranking, and he said, I call BS on some of these rankings. Young players are now delusional and too pampered from college facilities where football isn't the main thing. So there you go.
So there's that. What else did he say?
Old man yelling at clouds.
Yeah, he had a couple other things. What else did he say? So I agree with that one. I'll give him.
Players banded together because they don't like ownership and didn't give honest feedback in hopes to smear the reputation of the Jets.
Well, I mean, it's the Jets, so you don't need to band together to smear the reputation. I think the Jets have been doing that for 50 years. They've been smearing their own reputation. So,
well played.
Yeah, that part, I don't think the players have to do anything about banding together to smear ownership and the way the Jets run their organization.
But it does seem, though, that these rankings have gotten enough publicity that there have been examples where it seems like teams' ownership has been almost shamed into improving facilities, improving the weight room, improving the cafeteria,
I don't
things like that.
I don't think there's any question that teams look at this and, depending upon who their ownership is, will look at that and say, hey, man, we need to make upgrades here. We need to upgrade our facility. I mean, I look at the Denver Broncos, their training room or their locker room was one of the worst graded locker rooms in football. Well, it really hasn't changed much since I played in that locker room, right? And it's a fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's smaller. And they've got to walk down the hallway to go play video games, or whatever it is. I mean, it just is insane to me. But like they want those section to video games in the locker room and the Papa Shot and all those other things. So that's the world we live in, and the Broncos are redoing their entire facility. They're building a new one. So I do think there is some merit to saying, hey, listen, I would like this to be a little nicer, this to be a little bit better, and teams respond to that, especially the training table, the cafeteria, some of those things that are important to players, and I think should be important to the organization. So it's good to get that feedback.
So let's get to some of the stories that are going on out there. This one's kind of juicy, and it's led to apparently a showdown at the Starbucks. So out at the Combine, couple of different NFL insiders, Jordan Schultz, who you know from Fox, he came out and said that Tom Brady hosted Matthew Stafford at his ski resort in Montana,
right,
and that it was a hosting type of thing. It was, well aware of what was happening. Meanwhile, Ian Rappaport said, no, it was a chance encounter. And it led to Schultz approaching Rappaport at a Starbucks at the Combine.
Right.
And apparently it got heated enough that security had to be called in, and the NFL is investigating what went down. Who do you believe?
So here's what I believe. Like, could it have been some chance encounter at some posh ski resort? I know Brady owns like a place in Montana, right?
Yep.
So could I see, hey, Stafford's here, and I heard that Stafford's there, or we're connected, and say, hey, come over to the house, let's have a few drinks or whatever, or let's, eat dinner, whatever. Yeah, I could totally see that part. Like, it may have started off as a chance encounter, but eventually you sit down and you have a legitimate conversation, right? It wasn't just like, hey, we're in line together on the ski lift, and I said, hey, how's it going? Good, how are you? Great. Hey, the Raiders looking for a quarterback. I heard. Okay, see you around sometime. Like, they probably got together, I would think. It was kind of like the story of Stafford. Maybe it's Stafford.
Maybe it's a Stafford thing.
Maybe Stafford is stalking dudes.
This has happened before.
Right, Stafford, the story was Stafford and Sean McVay happened to be at the same resort in Cabo when Stafford played for Detroit, right? Am I getting this right?
Yep.
And that chance encounter over a few pops led to McVay going, let's get rid of Goff and get Stafford over here, which led to a championship. So, I mean, coincidence, or is Stafford a stalker? Like, that's the question you have to ask yourself.
Well, don't you have to kind of look at the Cabo encounter maybe a little differently now, knowing that you're just hearing this story too? I mean, come on. Two random meetings that lead to monumental career shifts?
Yeah.
Possibly?
Yeah.
One for sure, one maybe? Come on.
I do happen to think, don't you feel like Stafford's going to go back to the Rams? Don't you feel like this was puff out my chest, I want to be paid? Like, I mean, he's scheduled to make, I think, $27 million.
Yeah.
And all these $50 million quarterbacks, and you're Matthew Stafford, like, hey, you guys, like, these last 2 years or 3 years, let's take care of me.
Right.
Like, so puff out your chest a little bit, seek a trade, see what, don't you feel like it's more Stafford saying, hey, guys, I feel like the Rams are going to get that done.
Well, it also just doesn't make sense from Sean McVay's standpoint. McVay understands what Stafford means. You won a Super Bowl because of Stafford. Why would you, as Sean McVay, kick Matthew Stafford to the curb and replace him with who?
Right. Yeah, who are you going to go after?
Over, a bump up in pay?
Right. Sam Darnold? Who are you going to go get? You can get Aaron Rodgers? You going to coax Tom Brady out of retirement? I don't know. But I look at it like, hey, man, if you're in the same area, though, and you guys are two of the best that have ever played the game, and you just happen to be in the same area, and you're connected that way, of course you're going over to his house for it. Like, I don't think there's much ado about nothing.
Do you think Tom Brady reached out to Matthew Stafford in, let's say, L.A. and said, come on up to Montana and let's meet? Do you think it was as pre-planned as that?
Yeah, I don't know that. Yeah, could I see him going, hey, man, I'm going to go up to Montana ski if you want to hit up there in the off season? I'm sure he probably called did Brady call a LA game? I'm sure he called a Stafford game.
Sure.
Hey, man, come up to the off season. If you want to go skiing, let me know, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to be up in Montana this time of year.
Right.
It just gets a little tricky because now he's part ownership with the Raiders,
well,
right?
that's another good question. He's a Fox analyst. He's a part owner.
Yeah.
He's Tom Brady. Is it fair for NFL teams out there to say, hey, whoa, there's just too much potential for unfair advantages being gained here or tampering? Is it a legitimate beef?
Sure. I'm sure with a lot of teams there's a legitimate beef. Like if it happened, if you sit down during a game, you're calling a game, and you're on the field on Sunday, and you're talking to Matthew Stafford and go, hey, man, this offseason, if you want to come up and, chop it up, maybe go skiing, whatever, like, then that would be like recently they have given Stafford permission to seek a trade.
So it's not technically tampering.
So that part of it's not tampering. But if you did it during the football season,
right.
I think that there were some owners that would have some legitimate gripes about how you're conducting your business as part owner of the Las Vegas Raiders.
Let's get to some of the stuff going on right now at the Combine. Abdul Carter, the outstanding pass rusher, defensive end for Penn State, who is, I saw a mock draft recently that had him going number 1 overall.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, he has a stress fracture, but his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, was very quick to get out that surgery is not being advised and that while he's not going to work out at the Combine, he's going to be able to crush it at his Penn State Pro Day. Does this immediately, if you're a team drafting in the top 3, 4, 5, how do you look at him now?
I hope he drops to me at 3, 4, or 5. That dude is the best player in this draft. The dude he's a freak show. Like, he's a freak show edge athlete. And he can move around inside. He's just one of those dudes. We used to call him war daddies when I played. And the war daddy is as soon as you break the offensive huddle, you go ready, break, and you turn around, and you're like, where's that son of a bitch? And how are we going to block him?
Where's he lurking?
Right, because we don't, and so then you ultimately have to look at how you go about blocking guys, right? And saying, okay, because you can't do it the same way every time, because then defense coordinators go, okay, every time we line up, Carter over here, they're turning to him. So we're going to get one-on-ones over here with our other guys. So, sometimes you keep a tight end in. Sometimes you run a back over there. Sometimes you slide the protection. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. But the bottom line is every time you line up, you've got to take that guy into account and say, okay, where is he? And then if you've got another guy on that line of scrimmage that's a problem, now you're talking about, you're talking about a big time ability to get to the opponent's quarterback. So he is an absolute freak show athlete, great pass rusher. To me, he's the best player in the draft.
Yeah, and I think about guys like Jalen Carter with Philadelphia, right? Remember, he dropped because of some concerns. He had
some character issues.
And the Philadelphia Eagles, I think, were at 8. Was it 8? Right around there,
8 or 9.
8 or 9. They've
like
just said, okay, thank you. Thank you. And since then, he's been just awesome, for the Eagles. So I would look at Jalen Carter. Now, this is different. There's injury versus, character issues, but still, if you're talking about somebody that is worthy of being the number 1 overall pick, don't let him slide past.
No, you just
3,
put
4,
that,
5.
You draft that cat number 1. You put him in an oxygen tent. You rub buttermilk on his foot. You do whatever you got to do. Right, you got to do whatever you got to do. Put him in a dark room and slather him in ghee butter, and just say, hey man, you're our guy. Because that's the kind of dominant aspect. We always say, an elite level corner can take away one receiver. An elite level pass rusher can take them all away. He can eliminate all of them. So
are you kind of biased too? Because I know how there was for a long time, and I couldn't really push back, but you always would say, listen, I don't want to hear about quarterbacks being the best player in the NFL. They're the best quarterback in the NFL. The best player in the NFL for years, you said Aaron Donald is the best football player in the draft. So is in this era that we live in with everybody fascinated and hyperventilating, falling all over themselves to take quarterbacks. If Abdul Carter went number one, you'd feel good about that, right? Because that would be an acknowledgement of here's the best football player.
Yeah,
going number one in the
obviously,
draft.
obviously, people chase quarterbacks and overdraft quarterbacks, and and they talk about the level of importance of the position and all that. And I understand all that stuff. Quarterbacks don't necessarily play football; they play quarterback, and there's a big difference in the way that operates. And I understand the value, and I understand the importance. I understand all that stuff, but like, I think one thing that the Super Bowl showed you this year, and pretty much, to me, it's every year. But you look at the best teams in the league. Like, show me the teams that dominate the line of scrimmage. I'll show you the teams that win. And win on a consistent basis. Now, can an elite level quarterback erase all warts or most warts? Yeah, but who's an elite level quarterback who had an MVP season? Joe Burrow. Where were they during the playoffs? Oh, right where you and I were, sitting on these chairs watching it. And so if you can't dominate the line of scrimmage, I am sorry, you're just not going to win in the National Football League. Show me the Philadelphia Eagles. Arguably the best offensive line and the best defensive line in football.
But that took some time to build up, right? That's a compilation of really good players.
Yes.
Whereas teams look at and say, "Hey, I get the quarterback, and I can really start to accelerate my turnaround." Then build up everything else.
Correct. They built that thing from the inside out. Yeah. The other thing that they did, Howie Roseman did a great job of, one of the things that happens to you, I think two things about the draft, and we're in the combine season, right, and we're rolling into the draft season, is I really believe you've got to be very honest with yourself when you draft positional players if they can't play. And you've got to be willing to rip the Band-Aid off and say, we screwed that one up. Yeah. And what ends up happening, like the New York Giants, right, they're in a quarterback conundrum. And they've been there for a while. And where are they drafted now? 6, 7, whatever it is, right? And ultimately, last year, in one of the great quarterback drafts that we've had in this league in decades, right? Since 83, I heard people talking. Since 2018, right? We've got 6 guys drafted in the top 12 picks at the quarterback position. They somehow convinced themselves that Daniel Jones was going to drink a magic elixir and all of a sudden be good. Listen, man, the guy's a great athlete and he's a great dude. But what made you think all of a sudden he's going to get it? Now's the time he's going to get it. And you bypassed one of the great drafts at the quarterback position because why? You were hopeful? You thought Dumbledore was going to come out from Hogwarts and wave the magic wand and go, expecto patronus, and all of a sudden the guy was going to be worth a shit? No offense.
I love it when you do that.
Right.
Expecto.
But you got to rip the Band-Aid off. And you've got to make a decision. So I think you understand that. And I look at like Philadelphia. Hey, remember when they got Rieger in the draft? And they realized, oh, shoot, we screwed that one up. Jefferson went after him. Well, they went out and traded for A.J. Brown. They still drafted Devontae Smith. I look at their offensive line. They had one of the great centers that we've ever witnessed in this league in Jason Kelce. You know what they did? While he was still playing and going to Pro Bowls, they drafted Cam Jurgens, his replacement. And they continue to add to the best offensive line in football. They continue to add. Hey, Becton became available, and they said, you're not an offensive tackle. We're going to move you inside where you're going to have some success. They've done that. Hey, man, we've got Fletcher Cox. Still going to go get Jalen Carter. We're still going to build that. So most of the time what happens to you when you miss on a player and you keep drafting that position or you keep kicking that can down the road, you know what ends up happening to your football team? You neglect positions of strength. You're like, well, our O-line's pretty good, so we're not going to draft there. We're not going to build that. We're not going to continue to develop that. Oh, our D-line's pretty good. We're not. And then all of a sudden you look at it and you go, we've missed on wide receiver, quarterback. We've missed on all these guys. And meanwhile, the 2 positions of strength we've had now suck. And now our whole football team is garbage. And so, being honest with yourself, I think, is really, really important. And then, like I said, building your team from the inside out, you can never go wrong doing that.
So you think Abdul Carter might be the best player in the draft. Some people think Travis Hunter could be the best player in this draft. And Hunter, the great debate about him is he a wide receiver? Is he a cornerback? Will he have to choose? Could he play both in the NFL at the same high level that he played at Colorado? He came out and said, quote, "They say nobody's ever done it for real the way I do it, but I tell them I'm just different. I'm a different person." Can Travis Hunter just do something that has never been done before? We've seen two-way players, but can he do it at the level that he was doing it at Colorado, winning a Heisman, sometimes playing 110, 120 snaps a game?
Yeah. No. I mean, just like when you play in college, you face 2 or 3 guys during the course of the season. When you play at an elite level like he does, you play against 2 or 3 guys over the course of a season that are physically similar, gifted similarly to you. You play that every week when you play in the NFL. The bigger, faster, stronger. There are no blind sisters of the poor when you're playing in the NFL. Now, there's some teams that aren't very good, but from a talent standpoint, the talent level of each team is pretty similar. Then I think the other thing you have to ask yourself, okay, are you most people would say he's a natural corner. I've heard people talk about him being a wide receiver in this league. But you start to break down how much time you have during the week. How much time you have in the defensive meetings? How much time you have in the offensive meetings? Like, can you assimilate the entirety of your offensive, playbook, and then can you also be in those defensive meetings, doing all that and assimilating all that information? And then ultimately, the other thing that I would think about is, what style? Like, if you're going to be a corner, like a full-time corner, like, could you come over and play 12 snaps of offense? I would say, yeah, you could do that. So then it would be like, do we base out of 3 wide receiver sets? Do we base out of 11 personnel? Or do we base out of 12? Or do we base out of 21? What's our personnel groupings? So if you're a base team like several years ago, now they've changed some, but when Sean McVay first came in the league for the Rams, they were 97% in 11, 3 wide receivers. Right, zebra we used to call it. Okay. So, if you're in 3 wide receivers, 90% of the time, you're not bumping over from corner and going, okay, I'm the 3rd receiver. Now, if you play like San Francisco does, where they play a lot of 2 tights and 2 backs and all that stuff, and maybe 25% of your plays are out of 11 personnel, now I can come over and I can get my 8, 12 plays in that personnel grouping. That would make sense to me, but being full-time both ways doesn't. One of the guys that just popped into my head, when Jeremy Chin first came in the league, he's a safety now for Washington. He was playing with Carolina. And if you remember, many don't, I thought he should have been the Rookie of the Year. Yep. But Jeremy Chin was playing safety. He was playing nickel. He was playing, linebacker. He's playing rush defensive end at times. He did not actually go to a meeting. So they would break up their team meetings, and you go to individual meetings. The safeties go to the DBs, or safeties go to a room, the corners go to a room, the linebackers go to the room. He didn't. He went upstairs to one of the coach's office, and they walked through, okay, in this package you're going to be here, in this package you're going to be here, this is what we want you to do here and there. And he really excelled his rookie year, and then it just kind of fell off. It became, I think, overwhelming. Dan Quinn had told me this year, the head coach of Washington, when they got him, and said, hey, listen, you're not going to be required to do that. You're going to play one position so that you can become, a great player at that one position. And he played really much better football, having that singular focus at one spot. And I just think that there's a lot that goes into trying to play 115 plays or whatever on both sides of the ball.
See, I love the way you describe that, because I think a lot of people, they just look at a guy like Travis Hunter and say, okay, maybe he's going to be a corner primarily, but hey, what's stopping you from putting together a package? You always hear this. What about a package for Travis Hunter? And your point is that only works if it works within the context of your overall offense.
Correct.
Because you can't just, wave the magic wand and here you go. Here's a Travis Hunter package.
Right.
If it doesn't fit with what you already do on offense.
Yeah. So if you're saying, hey, man, in second down 7+ and third down 7+, we're an 11 personnel team and we want you to be in these situations. So anytime you get in third downs, there's usually 12 to 18 third down opportunities in any given game. So you've got, your third down and 3-, your third down and 4 to 6, and your third down and 7+, right? And so maybe you say, hey, third down and 7+, out of that, let's call it 14 plays, we're going to be third down and 7+ 6 times. All right? Those are your 6 plays. You're going to be that 11 personnel guy in those formations. We're going to get into that. And then second down and 7+. How many times? Let's say it's another 6 times. Okay, so here's your 12 plays. And now we can function within that in the context of you're our third receiver in nickel situations, second down 7+, third down 7+.
That's how it can work.
And that makes perfect sense to me. But there's just so many other situational things that you get into, that you're probably not getting the reps, you're probably not getting the practice that's going to be required for you to be efficient in all those areas.
But you've watched him play. If anybody can do it on a limited, 15, 20 plays and still make a big-time impact, it can be this guy.
He is built different, man. He's a goer. Like, he's one of those dudes. I've talked to several guys. We do a show here locally in Denver with Brandon Stokely. I've talked to Peyton Manning about, like, Marvin Harrison was not, like, he's not human. Like, the guy never, ever got tired. He could run, you could sit down all practice and go, just run 9s the entire practice, straight go routes. He'd run full speed, come back, and never got tired. There are guys that are built that way that can do more than the average dude, but still, this is NFL football. And to think that you're going to play both ways and be efficient both ways, I think is a disservice to how hard the game actually is.
Okay. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens.
Yeah, it is. Big time combine stuff. We'll talk about that next week, as well as we talk about 40 times and all the other bullshit they do at the combine that doesn't mean shit. So we'll talk about all that on Tuesday next week, right? When it all wraps up.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. I'll be live.
You love talking about those bench presses.
Oh my gosh, man.
Tune in for that next week.
Hey, you know what? Just remember this. If you run a really fast 40 or you do 225 for a lot of reps, it makes you either really fast or good at benching. It has nothing to do with your ability to play football. Just remember that. For everybody involved in the Stinkin' Truth podcast, I am Mark. He is Mike. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day.